Hey, welcome to another training on intentional living. This is Jonathan McGinley, a Maxwell certified coach, speaker, and trainer, and the founder of Intentional Man, a company that exists to give Christian men the tools, community, and coaching to pursue God-sized goals, live intentionally, and build lives of significance. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever set out to build a new habit and just found yourself right back to where you started only a couple weeks in? Or is there a bad habit that you've tried and tried to get rid of, but just can't seem to shake? I think pretty much every person who has ever lived has had to wrestle with the process of building good habits and the process of breaking bad ones. And if you find yourself frustrated right now, you're not alone. I can promise you that. So a lot of people who are struggling with this. It's estimated that about 45% of your everyday actions are a direct result of your habits. So about half of your everyday actions are a direct result of your habits. They play a crucial role in your life. And they're important because they save energy. And so it helps to not overload your brain so you can actually focus on what's important. If we didn't have habits, our brains would be going crazy. We'd have to try to focus on too many things. Every single thing that we did would be really hard. So habits are amazing. They're a good thing. But because if half of your decisions are made by them, then it's crucial that you understand how they work and to make sure that you're proactively designing them in a way that serves you in the long term. So they can be amazing when they're working in your favor, but they can also be absolutely detrimental to your long-term success if they're working against you. And as an intentional man, you must be proactive with your habits and not just let them happen to you. There's a lot that goes into building good habits and a lot that goes into breaking bad habits. But today I just want to talk about what I believe is the most crucial element in terms of making a change and putting in a new habit or breaking a bad one. And this is one thing that actually most people don't think about when they're trying to implement a new habit. And that thing is your identity. Your identity. And in his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear introduces us to 3 layers of behavior change. So we often think about 2 of these, but we rarely think about one of them. And that's the one I want to talk about today. But the outer layer. So if you think of kind of a target, there's 3 layers. The outer layer, this is outcomes. And these are the actual results that come from a habit or what we typically think about when we're setting goals. So you want to run a marathon, you want to save X amount of dollars, you want to lose 25 pounds, you want to get that promotion. Like these are pretty straightforward. And this is the reason many of us create goals or we create habits. We want a specific outcome. So that one's pretty straightforward. I think you understand that. The next layer beneath that is processes. So this is the actual routine or the system or the habit that you put in place in order to get the outcome or the result that you want. So if your outcome that you want is to run a marathon, the process would be to make a running schedule and you stick to it. To save X amount of money, you create a budget and you track your expenses. To lose 25 pounds, you create a workout routine and a meal plan. To get the promotion, you determine that you need to show up to work an hour early or you need to make a certain amount of phone calls every day. So you get the picture. In order to hit a goal or get that desired result, then you have to know the steps that it takes to get there, and that is the process. But then there's one more layer, the one we neglect the most, but I believe is the most important of all of them, and that is identity. That is in the inner circle. And so this is referring to your beliefs, your worldview, your thoughts about yourself, your self-image. So when most people set goals or habits, they think about those first 2 layers, right? What is it that I want to get, and how do I go about getting it? And these are very important pieces. You know, without them, you'd be directionless and you wouldn't have a concrete plan. So they are important, but most people fail to think about that inner circle, that identity piece. And that's ultimately what's going to determine if you're successful or not. Because behavior that is incongruent with your identity will never last. This is so important to realize. If a behavior that you're trying to implement or a behavior that you're trying to break is not in alignment with the way that you see yourself, you're going to have trouble making the change. So this is why, a lot of people push super hard for a goal only to just go right back to their previous habits when they're done. Or you could probably think of, one of these examples in your life. If you set a goal for yourself, push hard, put in all your willpower, all your might to do it. And then when you achieved it, you're so done with that goal, you're so over it that you don't want anything to do with it, right? Have you been there before? I think of a lot of people who do those, crazy 30-day diets or something. You totally cut out sugar or totally cut out carbs for 30 days. And then the second you achieve the goal, you go right back to consuming all the food that you did before. Or the people who want to read 2 books a month or a book a month, they push super hard to read the book and they hate every minute of it. And then they never want to read again when they achieve or fail in the goal. So why is it that people do this? Why do we revert back to what we did before we set that goal? And a lot of times it's because you have not taken on the identity of being a person who does those things consistently. So for that person who takes on the crazy diet and reverts back, they've not taken on the identity of being a healthy person. Deep down, they don't believe that there's someone who consistently make healthy decisions. Deep down, they've seen that over the course of their life that they haven't had self-control over their eating habits, and so they don't believe there's someone who eats healthy. For the person who's reading the books, they've not taken on the identity of being a reader. They were just someone who pushed hard to read a book or two, but ultimately they think of themselves as someone who hates reading. So the whole time they're reading, they're not really enjoying it because it's counter to who they think that they are. So if the story that you've told yourself your whole life is that you don't like reading, when you read, it's not in alignment with your identity. And if you don't change that identity, you're going to have trouble making that a consistent habit in your life. So I want you to think about areas of your life where this may be the case right now. Maybe you've always said that you're not a morning person. You've taken on that identity. So if that's the case, it's going to be hard to get out of bed to get to the gym. Maybe you've told yourself that you're not a business person. You grew up with parents that didn't run their own business, and so you don't believe that that can be you. It's going to be hard if that's your identity to start your own business. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you're just a spender. That's just who I am. I just spend. Then it's going to be really hard to save money. So there's a perfect example of this. It's kind of a popular example, but picture 2 guys who are offered a cigarette. And the first one who's offered, he says, "No, thanks, I'm trying to quit." And the other says, "No, thanks, I'm not a smoker." Who do you think is going to be more successful? The first guy, he's still taking on the identity of being a smoker. He just said, "I'm trying to quit." Well, that doesn't sound very convincing. He still believes that he is a smoker who's trying to quit. But the second guy has completely rejected that identity. He says, "I am not a smoker." So that's a powerful statement. Smoking is no longer in line with the way that he sees himself. Remember, behavior that is incongruent with your identity will never last. You might make the changes for a little bit, but eventually you're going to fall back to the level of your identity. Eventually you're going to fall back to how you view yourself. So here's the crucial shift that you must make. When you're setting goals, you need to focus on who you wish to become instead of only what you want to achieve. You need to focus on who you wish to become in the process instead of only what you want to achieve. If you want to build habits that truly last, you need to become a person who does those habits. So don't just run, become a runner. Don't just work out, become someone who loves fitness. Don't just start a business, become a businessman. Don't just hope you're a good friend. Be a person who always stays in touch. Don't just set random relationship goals. Become a great husband. The purpose of our goals and habits should be leading us to a new identity that sticks. So there's another great way of illustrating this point. It's been around for a long time. I was trying to track its original origin, but some say it's from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Some people date it even back to like the 1950s, but you may have heard this before, but I want you to really think about if this is common practice in your life. And this is the be, do, have model. Be, do, have. So it's pretty similar to what we just looked at before, but just another way to kind of think about this. So the have, this is what you want to achieve. So the have is what you want to achieve. The do is the actions, the process that you'll need to achieve those results. And the be is who you are. It's your identity. So it's very easy for people to go in reverse order when they're trying to build a habit or they're trying to hit a certain goal. So see if you can relate to this in some way. this order. I know I've been here before, definitely caught myself in this thinking. I hear it all the time in conversations with people. So this is kind of the backwards thinking when you're talking about this be, do, have model. So it starts off, when I just have blank, then I will do blank, which will make me blank. So for example, when I just have more money, then I will give to the church, which is the do, and then I'll be a generous person. I will be. When I just have a wife, then I'm going to start cleaning my room, and then I will be a clean person, right? When I just have more money, then I can go on vacations, and then I'll be happy. When I just have that promotion, then I'll start leading a team, then I will be a leader. So can you recognize some of this thinking in different areas of your life? It's really easy to fall into this trap. And this is one of the biggest things that I see and hear in working with men. There's no sense of urgency to develop the character or the identity until some sort of defining moment. So I see this all the time with guys who want to be married, but they're not putting any work to better themselves now, thinking that they'll just make all the changes when they get married. Well, if you wait until you have something to change, it's most likely not going to be in line with your identity. If you haven't formed that new identity, it's going to be really hard for that habit to stick. So if you want a more successful marriage, become a better man now. A man who's ready for marriage. Become a man now who is a healthy person. Become a man now who is good with finances. So that's the reverse order. We should be going in this order where you start with the be, the do, and then the have. So you would ask yourself then, who must I become? Then what must I do so that I can have blank, right? So I must become a generous giver, which means that I do actively give to my church so that I can have financial freedom, right? I must become a healthy person and work out and eat regularly so that I can have more energy and be more confident in my body. Again, in thinking of habits and goals, the question we should be asking ourselves at the beginning is, who am I seeking to become? When we take on the identity of someone who does a specific action, it's way more likely to speak. Okay, so that makes sense. The be, do, have. We want to start with who we want to become, then figure out what we need to do to then have a certain result. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, how do we do this? How do you upgrade your identity? So I just want to give you some quick action steps and tips that you can do to start implementing now to build a new identity. So I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quickly. But the first one, you need to start paying attention to your language. Absolutely crucial. Start paying attention to the way that you talk. We typically are what we tell ourselves. So be careful when you make these I am statements. Start to catch yourself when you say something like, I am not a morning person, or I'm not good at running a business. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a writer. I'm not a salesperson, right? You most likely use that language way more than you think you do. And it's affirming an identity that you ultimately don't want. So start to pay attention when you do this. You'll probably also start to notice when people around you use this kind of language as well. It's more often than you think. You'll start to catch it. So here's a simple way to change this when you're saying it or thinking it. Instead of saying you are not a morning person, just use the simple phrase, up until now. I heard this from a friend of mine and I love this. I've started to use it in my life. So you use the phrase up until now. So up until now, I have not been a morning person. Up until now, I have not been someone who goes to the gym. Up until now, I have not been good with finances. It's subtle, but you can see the power behind it. You're stating your intentions to be different in the future. So you're not lying about yourself. So sometimes the problem with affirmations is that we don't actually believe with what we're saying. There's evidence from the past that's stacked against us. But with this phrase, you're acknowledging that that was the old you, but stating that in the future you're going to be different. So when you catch yourself saying an identity statement, include the up until now phrase to help you form your new identity. So step one, watch your language and use that up until now phrase to kind of reframe that. Okay, number two, ask yourself better questions. Ask yourself better questions. Tony Robbins said the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is the questions that you ask yourself. We're all asking ourselves questions throughout the day. So successful people ask themselves better questions. Intentional men ask themselves better questions. So here's a simple one that you can start doing to form a new identity. Just start to repeatedly ask yourself the question, what would a healthy person do? This is if you're wanting to take on the identity of a healthy person. Ask yourself, what would a healthy person do? If you want to be a disciplined person, ask yourself, what would a disciplined person do? If you want to take on the identity of a leader, ask yourself, what would a leader do? What would a godly man do? What would a great business do? Whatever identity it is that you want to develop, ask yourself over and over throughout the day, what would someone who is successful in this area do? So I heard a story, I think this actually comes from Atomic Habits too, but he told a story of a woman who lost 100 pounds just by asking the simple question, what would a healthy person do? So in each situation she encountered throughout the day at a restaurant or wherever she was, what would a healthy person order? In the morning when she was tired and didn't want to go out of bed, she would say, what would a healthy person do? She just asked herself that question over and over and over. She ended up losing 100 pounds. And I guarantee you she took on the identity of a healthy person because she was asking herself better questions and taking the actions of what a healthy person does. So that's a good way that you can do it. Pick a question that you can ask for the identity that you want and ask yourself the same question over and over throughout the day and make your decisions that way. Okay, number 3, reinforce your identity with small wins. Okay, so determine who you want to be and then consistently do small actions that reinforce that identity. In order to believe that you have a new identity, you have to prove it to yourself. So this is where habits and identity are kind of a loop. They're a feedback loop. They feed into each other. The more you do an activity, the more you take on that identity. The more you take on that identity, the more you do the activity, right? So the problem is that most people try to change their identity with huge wins. You do the 75-day hard challenge, which is extremely difficult, and you miss a day, and you just take on the identity of someone who's a failure or someone who isn't healthy. So if you would have started with, I'm just going to go run twice a week, and you consistently did it, then you're reaffirming that desired identity. So when the goal is to become a person, you don't feel like you have to do all these crazy, massive, monumental things. You have to just do little actions that align with your new identity. And you don't have to be perfect either. You just need to have more evidence for you than against you. So it doesn't mean that you're never going to mess up. It just means that you need to more consistently do the actions of the kind of person you want to be than to not do the actions. So start to build evidence that this is who you are. So that's why I would say sometimes we need to start smaller, give ourselves some momentum, prove to yourself that you're this kind of person, and then you can build from there. Okay, so then the last one, number 4, this is a huge one. Spend time with people who have the identity that you want. Get around people who have your desired identity. See what they do. See how they think. See how they talk. We become like the people that we spend time with. So if you want to be healthy, but you're surrounded by people who don't take that on as their identity, it's going to be hard for you to make that change. We're social beings, so you can leverage that to your advantage. So that's a massive one. I would just say, figure out the identity of the person you want to become, find people in your life who have that identity, and start to just hang out with them more. Start to take advantage of that. Start to be with them, see how they make decisions, see how they act. That identity will then be passed on to you. So to recap those 4, pay attention to your language. Use that up until now statement. Number 2, ask yourself better questions, like what would a successful person do? What would a healthy person do? Number 3, reinforce that identity with small wins. Number 4, spend time with people who have the identity that you want. So this is a crucial one. I want you to think about this in your life. Catch yourself with those statements when you're saying, I am not a morning person. I am not a healthy person. If that's your identity right now, it's going to be really hard to make, that habit change that you really want. So you have to start shifting this. So this is a good way to go about it. Ask yourself, what do I need to become when you're setting goals? And that'll help you think this way. So hope this was encouraging. Hope it was helpful to you. I would love to hear your feedback on this. Make sure you leave a comment. Share this episode with somebody if you found it really helpful. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here with me. Until next time, live a life that you're proud of by living intentionally.